45-year-old Greg Yocum claims he's responsible for helping the U.S. government break up at least 4 well-known drug cartels. Yocum tells a shocking story about how he believes drugs are being brought into the United States. Laura Castaneda talked with Yocum about life as an informant. She joins us now with more.
Norma, guys, seems to be no question that Greg Yocum has made a difference in getting drugs off our streets. He did it at great personal risk as an undercover informant. Drug lords have put a contract on his life. Despite that, Yocum went on camera to talk about problems with the so-called war on drugs, a war he has seen from both sides. Crime was a way of life for Greg Yocum. He spent 6 years behind the controls of a single-engine plane, flying loads of marijuana and cocaine for South American and Mexican drug lords. It was a dangerous life, but Yocum, an adrenaline junkie, says the payoff was big. He made hundreds of millions of dollars in the illicit trade, but all that changed in the late 1970s when Yocum was indicted for conspiracy to import 200 tons of marijuana from Mexico to the U.S. His days as a smuggler were over. Instead of going to jail, he would spend the next 12 years working for the government as an undercover informant.
The government gave me and my associates carte blanche as long as we were doing a good job smuggling. The federal and state agencies would be able to apply for and receive continuous financial assistance.
During that time, Yocum says he learned the truth about the war on drugs. He says some of the agencies who are supposed to keep drugs out are part of the problem.
But the U.S. Border Patrol is directly responsible for importing a vast amount of illegal drugs into this country. I was hired by one cartel not to fly drugs into the country, but to land in Naco, Mexico, where the U.S. Border Patrol drives cocaine across the border in Border Patrol vehicles.
This agency does not tolerate any act of corruption, especially the kind of what you're talking about, and we will deal with it as we find out about it. We've caught, over the past 5 years, over 250 tons of marijuana coming through the southern border, 7.5 tons of cocaine coming through the southern Arizona border. We're the leading agency in southern Arizona regarding the interdiction of narcotics.
I understand the Department of Public Safety's in the Tucson area is missing about 10 tons of marijuana and millions of dollars in cash. I never thought that we would get to the point where the government is directly responsible in smuggling, but that's what's happened.
Despite a run of successful busts and indictments, Yocum says law enforcement agencies began to clash, each wanting more credit than the other. Then in 1989, he was offered a job smuggling a load of drugs to Phoenix. Instead of accepting, he says he went to Maricopa County Attorney Rick Romley, hoping to strike a deal. But Yocum says Romley wasn't interested in going after the big cartels. Romley denies the meeting ever took place.
He wants to load the courts up, load the prisons up with insignificant little cases, while tons of drugs are flowing into his area. It's called job security.
This has never been an issue ever asked of me before, ever. I don't know where he's coming from. Maybe he got a bad deal from somebody. Maybe he's working with the feds and he's a disgruntled informant. I don't know.
As for the U.S. war on drugs, Yocum says there is no war. He says it's all a political game.
There is no war on drugs. It's a financial war over money, of which agencies can get the most. The only losers in the war on drugs, besides the poor, sick drug addict, are the ordinary taxpayers.
The Department of Public Safety declined an on-camera interview, but says DPS denies any wrongdoing by our officers, adding that if Greg Yocum has specific information relating to the misconduct of a DPS officer, he should make himself available for interviews and depositions. We should note Greg Yocum is also pitching his story to a writer and a movie producer. He says the profits would go to the IRS. Right now, he owes them nearly $200,000. Norma Guy, as a result of our interview with him, the Department of Justice is investigating the allegations of DPS and the Border Patrol.
Okay, strong allegations. Thank you, Laura.
And Yocum has harsh words about the Aerostat, the multi-million-dollar balloon used in drug fighting at the border. As Bud Foster found out, the success rate of the Aerostat depends on who you talk to.
Just one of these balloons costs from $17 to $20 million, and there are 11 of them spread from coast to coast now. 6 more are under construction. Balloon may not be a good word to describe one of these things because they weigh several tons each. They blanket the border, their radar looking for suspicious airplanes, planes which might be smuggling drugs from the south.
I found that actually the aerostat program does not work.
Yocum will tell 2020 tonight he flew airplanes laden with drugs, and he flew under, around, and through the aerostat system and was never caught by its radar.
I don't think aerostat can distinguish between a truck and an airplane. Probably can't even distinguish between a swirl cactus and an airplane. It might work over water, but it certainly doesn't work in mountainous areas.
The aerostat is just one tool in the government's war on drugs, a system supported by Arizona Senator Dennis DeConcini, who says the system was not designed to be 100% effective.
They think you spend this $19 million for this radar, and thereby you're never going to have a drug pass or an airplane pass through here. It's impossible. There's hundreds of thousands of planes passing our border every month.
There are problems with the system. Ground clutter can give false readings. It needs considerable maintenance and can't fly in bad weather. The government will say, however, it gets a good bang for the buck.
And the cost of providing that same coverage by aircraft would have been about $500 million. So the aerostats have done it for approximately $87 million.
No one will argue there are ways around the aerostat, and Yocum apparently found them. How many others have found holes in the system, no one knows. But it does raise the question, is the taxpayer getting a good return on their investment? Bud Foster, 9 News.